welcome back to the Mixing Music Podcast. I'm your host, Dee Kei, and unfortunately, Lu is not with me today. He is busy working on a mix right now with some clients, but this episode is all about one of our sponsors and good friends of the podcast, Antares Autotune. And specifically, I've been getting a lot of questions about how exactly to use Autotune and even what the different types of autotunes are, what you can get if I can only pick one, and exactly what's going on in the background of these. I even want to answer questions such as is how to get natural tones out of autotune, and even dive deeper into specific settings or how Humanize and all the different knobs works. So today, I want to start with a simple blurb and say that if you're looking at getting the best deal that you can, that I can offer you, Autotune and Antares is one of our sponsors, so you can support us and support them by going to mixingmusicpodcast.com/autotune. If we have any discounts going with them, you can find it through there, and any sort of purchases you make through that link will get kicked back to us, so we appreciate any sort of support. But let's get into it. Autotune, and the reason why I personally love Autotune, I think that Autotune is actually one of the best vocal production softwares that you could buy. From a tuning perspective, Autotune is famous for the very fast, glitchy tuning. But honestly speaking, you can use it as a very subtle enhancement tool, and oftentimes I find that it sounds a lot more natural than people think it does. There's a lot of natural capabilities as well as that super robotic capability. People tend to think that the robotic stuff, anything that you use Autotune for, can't sound natural, it only sounds robotic, but that's just not the case. If you dive deeper into the flex tune and the Humanize algorithms and those knobs, as well as very slow attack speeds, retune speeds, then I really do believe that Autotune is one of the most diverse vocal production tools that you can have. This is not a stab at other companies, and I don't necessarily want to spend a lot of time comparing, but I do want to bring up the fact that different tuning softwares and algorithms do sound different. Now, other algorithms could potentially even be superior, but even if that were objectively true, we cannot deny that the sound of Autotune from Antares has been used on so many hit and popular records that it will be recognized if it's Autotune or if it's something else. Even by a general consumer, there's the way that things glitch and the things kind of tune that it doesn't sound like Autotune sometimes. Most of the time you can get away with it, honestly, but there's specific moments where Autotune sounds like Autotune and there's no substitution for it. And I love and use Autotune on every single record. We've been working with Autotune for years now. I don't know anybody in the higher level professional industry that uses another tuning software consistently and regularly and swears by it. It's just one of those, don't even think about it. So I want to go into the different offerings first, because people have asked me, what are the different types of autotunes? Because we know there's Autotune EFX, there's Hybrid, there's Access, there's Artist, there's Pro, and I wanted to briefly explain all the differences. So Autotune Pro, which they even have a new version of, it's called Autotune Pro X. It's got an updated interface. It looks really cool. Autotune Pro is the flagship and most expensive of all of the Autotune series software. It's absolutely amazing. It's got all of the features that you could ever want or have ever had in various and previous versions of Autotune, minus the effects that come with only the EFX version of Autotune. But in the Autotune Pro, you also have graph mode. I know a lot of Charlie Puth is famous for using graph mode instead of Melodyne, but it's basically like Melodyne, but using the Antares tuning algorithms rather than the Sony Melodyne. I think it's Sony, right? Is Melodyne Sony? I'm not sure. I need to look it up. But the Melodyne algorithm. And if you like the way that Charlie Puth's vocals sound, he uses a lot of graph mode and then alongside the natural auto tune. Which, let me just explain real quick. Melodyne is one of the few manual tuning options. Melodyne is not Autotune. So Autotune is the name of a specific plugin, and Terrace is the parent company that makes Autotune. Now, Autotune is also like a genre of tools. It's like auto tuning, so any sort of signal goes into the software or hardware, automatically corrects and centers the pitch to whatever the designated key is. That and it kind of like corrects the pitch, the melody of whatever's going through that processor. So Autotune is a specific plugin name, but it's also just like a genre of plugins, because there's other plugins that automatically tune instruments and vocals, right? So I want to be very clear about that. Melodyne is a form of manual tuning. So Autotune Pro has a graph mode where you can manually tune along with automatically tune any sort of vocals or single monophonic melodic tracks. Autotune Pro is absolutely amazing. The downside with Autotune Pro is that it is pretty DSP heavy, so unless you got a really nicely built computer, if you stack too many of them, it can slow down the process of the computer. It can also add latency, although they do have a low latency option, which kind of relieves some of the stress on the computer, but it's not absolutely perfect. So if you use a lot, I mean, if you're mixing, Autotune Pro is, I think, just like the way to go. Unless you specifically want the modulation and the melodic generation that comes with EFX, which we'll get to in a minute there. But Autotune Pro is kind of your end all. And if you're only tracking 1 or 2 tracks at a time or a few tracks at a time, Autotune Pro X is going to be enough. You know, your computer can handle it. It's when you have like big mix sessions, or like when you're especially have tons of recording tracks and they're all auto-tune, like it may not be, it's just a lot of DSP. So just think about that, consider that. But it is got almost all the features. The next one is Artist. Basically, Artist is optimized for live performance. I use Artist a lot because it's slightly less DSP, uses slightly less of the computer processing, but it's the exact same algorithm as Autotune Pro X. So people think there's this conspiracy theory that Autotune Artist and Autotune Pro X sound different. Well, according to their back end, it's not supposed to at all. I'm not saying that it's not going to sound different, but I will say that it's not supposed to sound different. And if it does, in fact, it's not supposed to. I don't know what that is, but it's supposed to be a lighter version with all of the extra stuff taken off, and the low latency tracking mode is really, really great for live performances as well as recording in the studio without any sort of outboard DSP, which we'll get into with Autotune Hybrid in just a moment here. I love and use Autotune Artist all the time just because it is slightly less DSP, and most of the time I'm not using graph mode. And because I have access to all of them, I might actually go for Autotune Artist first before I go for Pro, because if I don't have to use that extra DSP, I won't. And Autotune Artist actually has almost all of the functionalities that Pro does, minus the graph mode and a couple other things. But Autotune Artist is your basic, great for recording, great for mixing, less DSP version of Autotune Pro, minus the graph mode. I want to quickly throw in Autotune Hybrid. Autotune Hybrid is basically Autotune Artist, but it's for DSP machines. So for example, that if you have HDX or any sort of Avid DSP, imagine like this is like using the Universal Audio built-in auto-tune. It's very similar to that, except this is for other third-party outside of Universal Audio DSP performances. So like Avid has a bunch of different systems, including Venue as well, various different DSPs, outboard DSP sort of stuff. So this is mostly for people that have Pro Tools Ultimate. I don't really know of any other systems that use outboard DSP, but what it does is it completely eliminates any sort of latency issue. You don't need hybrid unless you specifically have not just Pro Tools Ultimate or whatever they call it now, the highest level of Ultimate, but the hardware that goes along with it. So if you have regular interfaces but have Pro Tools Ultimate, you're not going to be able to take advantage of the DSP. And if you have Universal Audio, which has built-in DSP, Autotune Hybrid will not take advantage of the Universal Audio DSP. It's if you want to take advantage of the Universal Audio DSP, then you have to buy Auto-Tune through Universal Audio because they have a specific way of accessing their own DSP, and Auto-Tune Hybrid will not automatically access it. If you do not have any sort of DSP systems and you pull up Auto-Tune Hybrid, it will just basically be Auto-Tune Artist. So there's really no point of that. Again, the reason why a lot of people get these DSP systems, we have it in our commercial studio here, just down the block from us, that Lou and I run together in the Mix Studios. So at In the Mix, we use hybrid or DSP HDX systems, which eliminates eliminates completely all latency. It's also the best system for integrating hybrid or outboard gear, but we won't get into that necessarily. That's not what this episode is about. But it's also the way that computers are and how low latency everything is already. If you've got a decently modern computer, you're not going to have crazy latency issues unless you just got like heavy sessions, or you're not thinking about that while you're recording or mixing. So Auto-Tune Hybrid is another option as well. So Auto-Tune EFX is one of the only auto-tunes that I don't know exactly what's different, but from what I understand, has a slightly different auto-tune algorithm for the tuning function itself to more accommodate all of the extra stuff that's going on. So there's a lot of modulation and melodic generation. Travis Scott, Mike Dean are famous for using them all the time. So they have a bunch of effects which include, again, like I already said, like distortion. Let me look up what it's saying on the I don't use EFX that often unless someone specifically wants to, but it's got like mutation effects, high pass filter, doubling, vocoder, distortion, warmth enhancer, and a bunch of other things. So it's not just your tuning, it's also like the actual sound of the vocals through various different things. And it's more meant for production rather than like mixing and recording. Like if you want to do weird things with it, it's a really great way to come up with interesting ideas and kind of just mess around with it. Just spend a couple hours on it. It's a lot of fun. I recommend Auto-Tune EFX Plus if you are a producer, if you're looking to make your vocals really interesting, if you want to just try things out. If you want to just use tuning, I know a lot of people that swear by EFX, that say that their voice sounds the best on EFX rather than the other artist or pro or whatever. I know that it may be slightly different. Again, I don't know the actuality of that, but I kind of think that there is something slightly different as well from a personal experience use. But the EFX, for the tuning alone, I don't know. I feel like I'm used to the sound of, and Artist and Pro is a little bit more reliable. But if you know you're going to use all of those other effects, the auto-tuning that you get from EFX is actually phenomenal. It's not a lesser version. It's just slightly different to accommodate for all the other effects. And I think that the difference between Pro and Artist versus EFX is less different than Auto-Tune, Artist, or Pro versus another brand of automatically auto-tuning plugins. So EFX is not a lesser. In fact, some people argue and say that it's a better version for their voice. It's just something to try out. I think there's demos on the website, but go ahead and watch some videos. There's a lot of great tutorials out there and a lot of videos. And as a mixer myself, I don't typically use EFX unless that's what the artist, producer, or engineer who sends me the session has on it. Like, I'm not going to reach for EFX first. I'm just going to reach for Artist or Pro first as a mixer, right? But EFX is a great production tool. And lastly is Auto-Tune Access. Auto-Tune Access is, quite frankly, the most simplified, the least amount of DSP processing, and the cheapest way to access Auto-Tune. So you kind of get the Auto-Tune algorithm, but you get less flexibility with it. So for example, on retune speed, instead of infinitely variable between 0 and whatever number it goes up to, you got slow, medium, and fast. So you only got 3 settings. And with humanize, which is the only other knob that you have on there, you got off, minimal, or maximum. That's it. And then obviously the scale and the key. But you don't have flex tune, you don't have natural vibrato, You don't have a lot of the other like adding notes to the scale or customizing the scales on the notes that are being tuned, that the incoming audio is being tuned to. So you don't have as much access to that. I use Access when I'm hitting the computer hard and there's a lot of DSP going, and it's like background vocals where I just need some like hard or medium tune, and I don't really give a crap about the flexibility of it. So I'm just trying to like save DSP as I go along. If it's something that's like a lead vocal, then I do want the slight bit of flexibility that comes with it. For example, I may want to turn on some of like the, what is it called? Like I may want to turn on like the formant shifting, the throat, some of the detune, the tracking, which is at the top right. I may want access to some of the other options, including low latency as well. I don't really recommend Access necessarily if you can afford all the other stuff, but luckily there's Antares, what is it, Unlimited right now, which is amazing. And let me go down to it. You can get access to every single Antares product. So it's Auto-Tune Unlimited. And again, once again, if you want to get access to that, it is Mixing Music Podcast /Auto-Tune. And you get all of their plugins, and we've talked about their plugins so many times before, so go ahead and listen to those other episodes where I talk to Henrik, who is a representative of Antares, and we talk about the various different plugins and offerings that they have. I use a ton of the Antares plugins within the bundle, not just Auto-Tune. They've got a lot of other cool things, including like the vocal EQ is amazing. They've got a plugin called Auto Key, which will actually, you can leave it on like the beat, for example, and it'll automatically kind of record and calculate what key the beat is in or the song is in. And then you can hit send to all auto-tunes or whatever. And then it populates every single auto-tune that's in your inserts to that key, that moment. So it's really, really great for automating a lot of that stuff. There's like the vocal warmer. They got the vocodist. They got a bunch of other different options within the Unlimited bundle that we're not going to get into because we're specifically focusing on the Auto-Tune specific series. But yeah, that's kind of my thoughts and kind of a quick explanation on everything. Once again, I'm like really, really biased, but real quick, shout out to another one of our sponsors. I've been working with, if you have 1/8 inch or 1/4 inch adapters that you keep losing. I know as a producer, as a mixer, you keep losing all of them. There's a buddy of mine, his name is Tucker, who started building and manufacturing these really aesthetic aluminum blocks, these like solid aluminum blocks. It's called Jack Blocks, JACK blocks.io is the website. And they're literally just these cubes that are really aesthetic and they're really magnetic, and you can connect them together and you can just put in any sort of adapters or jacks in there and you won't ever lose them, and it makes your desk look really cool. And because it's magnetic, I could just like attach it on the desk or on any sort of like open panel. Like if you're watching on YouTube, I'm pulling it up right now. But it's literally just this like aesthetic little box, and you could just put your adapters there because we all keep losing them. You can get 10% off your order right now, and they're fairly cheap too. Like for something in that solid and aesthetic, you'd think it'd be more, but it's $10 a block, and it goes down from there. Like that's the most expensive. That's if you buy a single block, but if you buy a pack of like 4 or 16, it's way less. And if you go to jackblocks.io and use the code Mixing Music Podcast. Sorry, just Mixing Music. If you use the code Mixing Music, you can get 10% off your order. So once again, that's jackblocks.io, and blocks is BLOX. So JACKBLOX.io, and use the code Mixing Music. You can check out and get 10% off on these they're like, it's heavy too. And having a bunch of these looks really nice on the desk. And they kind of stick together as well as on the desk, so really worth checking out there. They're really cool people. It's a brand new company, so go ahead and give them a follow on Instagram as well. They're really cool people. Tucker, I've met with Tucker a couple times now, who's the founder, creator of Jack Blocks, and it's just a really cool thing that he's got going on. You may have heard other people talking about it, so go ahead and check them out. All right, so on that note, if you're interested in listening to exclusive episodes of the podcast, getting 3 times the amount of content that I make, then go to mixingmusicpodcast.com/exclusive to get access to 2 more extra episodes every single week where we analyze and break down other interviews from other world famous producers or content creators about mixing, producing, mastering. We give a sneak peek every single week. So if you've been listening recently, you'll notice that we pull out one from the exclusive archives, just one a week, just to show you what you're missing out on. And they are phenomenal. Braden takes lead on it. It's mostly me and Braden, sometimes just Braden by himself, but it's mostly us together. And honestly, Braden does a great job picking the segments and we break it down. And the cool thing about it is that unlike this main form of content, every single time we focus on doing technical tips that you can take home and try right then and there. So if you're interested in learning more about that, go to mixingmusicpodcast.com/exclusive. Lastly, I want to hear your thoughts. Honestly, this is not like a sponsored portion, but if you've been watching or listening to the podcast, you may have noticed that there's a new segment out now called Home Studio Heroes with Nadik and Machi. DM me. I want to know your thoughts about that. Leave comments in this video or somehow get in contact with me. I want to hear your thoughts about how that's been going. This is an experiment we're trying with Nadik and Machi, who both work at our studio. If you have listened to their episodes, I want to hear your thoughts and kind of like what you think and what you'd like to learn and how we can differentiate between this sort of stuff, or if it really just takes away from this content. I want to know your thoughts and how they're doing and how you project that they will do over there. So, and if you haven't checked it out already, please go listen to the Home Studio Heroes segment of the Mixing Music Podcast. It is an official segment of the Mixing Music Podcast, and it comes out every Monday morning, whereas this flagship content comes out every Tuesday morning. So thank you so much for listening. If you have any questions, just DM me on Instagram at DK Mixes. And happy mixing, my friends, and stay saucy.